I want to remind you that there is a great special coming up on TBN on Sunday, and it's great even though it's hosted by me, but that's not the important part. It's a half-hour heart-to-heart talk with a young lady I know fairly well, my daughter, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Be sure to tune in for a special edition. It's called Conversations on Sunday, right here on TBN. I think you'll find it most interesting. Well, my next guest is Senior Vice President of the NBA's Orlando Magic. He's an executive with over 50 years' experience, and he's authored over 100 books. Think about that, 100 books. His latest is this gem called Character Carved in Stone, the 12 core virtues of West Point that build leaders and produce success. It is a real honor to welcome a dear friend, Pat Williams. Pat, glad to have you here.
Hey, Governor. How are you?
Thank you. This book is of special interest to me because you talk about the 12 core values of West Point, the military academy. What is it about West Point that is a unique breeding ground for leaders?
Leaders, when I go to West Point, and I've been there a number of times, Mike, immediately you're hit with three things: leadership, teamwork, and beat Navy. I mean, all over the campus, you see nothing but these signs, no matter the time of year, beat Navy. Well, they invited me to speak to their sports teams a few years ago, Mike, the men and women's teams and the coaches, and I did that. And afterwards, they gave me a wonderful tour of the campus, which is quite thrilling. And we ended up in a little park called Trophy Point, looking out over the historic Hudson River. And I noticed a series of benches, stone benches. I counted them. There were 12 of these benches that were winding their way through the park. I said, well, that's kind of interesting. But for some reason, I decided to walk over and look at one of the benches. I'm glad I did, because at the end of that bench, on either end of the bench, there was a word carved into the stone. And I kept looking all the way through. There was a different word carved into each one of the 12 benches. And then I thought, there's got to be a backstory here. Well, there was. The West Point class of 1934, on their 50th class reunion, 1984, they donated those benches to the school as a gift. And then, based on their service during World War II and Korea, they picked these 12 words that they found had been most important to them in their life as leaders during combat and during those war periods.
Of all those virtues that you saw on those 12 benches, what were some that touched you or impacted you the most?
Well, the first one was compassion. We used Ulysses S. Grant.
You don't think of compassion when a military operation.
Well, with Grant, he was compassionate toward those men, and he had great compassion in his home. He loved his wife, and he was compassionate toward the horses that they all rode on. The story is told of Grant coming down a pathway. He noticed off to the side this soldier that was just beating and whipping his horse unmercifully. And Grant exploded with anger and went over to that young soldier, threatened him with an inch of his life. Grant just could not stand to see an animal abused. So another way of putting compassion, perhaps, Mike, are people skills.
Wow.
Great leaders have people skills. Under integrity, we talked about Dwight D. Eisenhower, who has said many times that he thinks the most important thing in any walk of leadership is integrity. He said you can't lead without it. The other one, Mike, is Matthew Ridgway. We do a chapter on him, and I'm picturing it's D-Day. We write about this. It's D-Day. And rather than being back in England or out in the English Channel, you know, his specialty was parachuting in. There's General Ridgway parachuting in with his troops, you know, in the dark of night on the first day of D-Day into German-held France. And right there with his men parachuting in, we were able to dig out some really interesting stories about some of these remarkable people.
And Pat, what are the great applications that the average business person, housewife, school teacher, police officer can glean from a book about military heroes who went to West Point? Because not everybody goes to West Point, but there's got to be an application there.
Mike, everything rises and falls on leadership in our country at every level. And we need strong leadership in our homes, in our churches, our schools, in our sports, in business. We do. Leadership always starts with vision. Great leaders are visionaries. They see the future before it gets here. And they have the wonderful ability to communicate that vision effectively. I mentioned people skills. That's the third aspect. You can't be a great leader if you don't have a heart and empathy and love for people. And then character counts in leadership. It was Norman Schwarzkopf who said, I am convinced that leadership consists of two vital components. He said strategy and character. And then he said, if you have to do without one, he said, do without the strategy. And then finally, every great leader I've ever studied, by and large, they have a serving heart. Jesus was the ultimate model of serving-hearted leadership. And to be a great leader, to have that heart of service first before you lead, is really significant. Those are just a few thoughts that come to mind.
Pat, thank you. Your book is such a terrific reminder of really what made America great, and some of the people who have helped shape this country through their unselfish service. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mike. All the best to you.
All right, Keith, why don't you tell everybody how they can get a copy of this great book by Pat Williams?
Well, the book Character Carved in Stone is available at Amazon and all major booksellers. You can also learn more at patwilliams.com. Keep up with him on Facebook at Orlando Magic Pat Williams and on Twitter at Orlando Magic Pat.